part of the book is to try to create this intergalactic music theory of everything. Now, how would you think, what kind of theory would you need to talk about all music and not just Beethoven and Bach and Chopin or something like that? So that's really the big challenge here. And so we have to actually get rid of those very important cultural questions, what makes music great, and just ask the simpler question, what is music?
So the golden record, you guys, how did you get interested in that?
So, it's a funny question because, Daniel and I have known each other for years, but we don't get to see each other very often. So we have this annual conference that takes place somewhere else in North America every year in November. And so in that particular year, whenever it was, 5 years ago, it was in Vancouver.
Yeah, we were in Vancouver.
And so we met up for breakfast, and at the time I was sort of, grappling with lots of different ideas, and they didn't really seem to come together. And we were talking about it for a long time. And then, Daniel was saying, I think there is a connection, and the connection is the golden record. And he was right. So, this was also something that Daniel had been thinking about. And so that's why we decided we're going to write a book.
So let's tell them what the golden record is and how far away from us it is right now. I think there's two of them, and they're very far away from us right now.
If someone, at least so we can have some context.
The golden record was sent up. This is a sort of a record, an LP of recorded music from around the world that NASA under Carl Sagan sent up into space in 1977 in 2 Voyager spacecrafts in order to share with the universe something of human culture and hopefully make contact with aliens. That was the idea behind it. It was pretty crazy at the time. But I think today, with the discovery of so many exoplanets, it's becoming a little bit less crazy of an idea.
Although it's very far away from us now. They're at the intersection of our sort of group of planets and the next one. It's out voyaging further than anything has ever voyaged from the Earth.
Yeah, it's the furthest human object, I think, from our sun at the moment.
Yeah.
and the furthest our culture has ever sort of gone out into the world, into the universe.
Now, there's a lot of songs on the golden record. Now, so you decide the thing that brings together a lot of these ideas is the golden record. Now, do you sit down and listen to it together?
We've both listened to it many, many times. Yeah.
Okay. Now, this is Carl Sagan's idea, was that you'd send this record player off into space. But if I'm an alien, what am I going to make of this? It has no earthly context. It didn't grow. When I listen to jazz, I hear the room Miles Davis was in, and I have some understanding of what that room was, even though it's very far away, or Chicago blues, or even early recordings of Bach. I can understand the context of some of those things. Now, if I get all this music and I have no context, what is it?
Well, that's our question, really, in our book on alien listening. I mean, if you put music in this context, it changes the entire meaning of music, right, and how you think about it and how you theorize music. So this is what our research is about. And the strange thing is, once you take away all those cultural contexts, what is it? It's just earth music.
Now, so Pythagoras had the first idea of what music was. What did people think of Beethoven when we got to Beethoven in relation to monotone music? That might have been like listening to alien music in some sort of sense, no?
Absolutely, yeah. It's one thing that is really interesting about the way the golden record is put together is that when they decided to make it, they went through various versions. And the first draft was, let's just put all of Bach's music on it.
Right. Which is not a bad place to be, right?
Yeah, and then the second version was, let's just have a mixtape with Beethoven 9 on it, but nothing else. And, that was the latest technology at the time. And so they thought they were going to do that. But then, the team around Carl Sagan spoke to Alan Lomax, the ethnomusicologist, and he said, you really should try to go out of your comfort zone. And so they ended up putting a lot of music from all parts of the world on it. And so the notion of what music was really broadened out. And so, they tried really hard to get a sense of, music is not just one thing. It's not just Bach and Beethoven, but it is also, music by Australian Aboriginals, it's Peruvian wedding music, it's sub-Saharan drumming, and so for the time that was incredibly progressive.
Right? Louis Armstrong.
Louis Armstrong is on there as well, yeah. And I mean, they also wanted to have some American popular music. And one thing that I find really interesting is that, what ended up being put on the record is just, it's all African-American popular music. So they have Blind Willie Johnson, Louis Armstrong, and Chuck Berry. So there's talk about how they wanted to include the Beatles as well, but they couldn't get the copyright for Here Comes the Sun. But what ended up being put on the record is really, by the standards of the time, about as broad-minded as it gets. And so, to get back to your question about what is music, it's really a kind of diverse and open-minded concept of music that was sent out into outer space. And that's really different from the very first conception of what they were going to do with this. And one detail that I find absolutely mind-blowing is that they did all this in record time. They only had 6 weeks from beginning to end. And so they just, did all this.
Yeah, they didn't have Spotify.
Yeah, exactly.
And to confuse the aliens even more, they actually also
Yeah.
included the sound of nature as well. So you have waves and babies crying, and also whale song. So I think and actually that would be indistinguishable for the aliens from human music. So in that sense, they also sent the music of the earth that is, in one sense, non-human.
What is it that makes us human? What is the things that we can look at and say, we're different from animals? I mean, lots of animals sing songs, birds sing songs, whales, hum or communicate through songs. But is there something different about, Beethoven? Is that the height of our humanness embodied in this arranging of these sounds, this great, beautiful thing?
That's a great question. So the makers of the Golden Record thought so. In the final version, there are 2 pieces by Beethoven, 3 pieces by Bach. So they kind of did get special treatment in the end. And the idea behind it was that if there are aliens out there who are interested in our music, then they might want to have something that they can meaningfully compare against each other. And so they thought having multiple pieces by the same composer would help them. But to get back to your earlier question, there's absolutely no reason why aliens would pick up on style, right? On compositional style, because the one piece by Beethoven is, the Fifth Symphony. It's like a fast and furious piece, big orchestra, and the other is the Cavatina from the Slate String Quartet. So it's this very intimate, very slow piece of music. There's a lot of different stuff going on. The only thing that links them is that they're by the same composer. The same is true for the pieces by Bach. So I'm not at all convinced that style and the same composer are really relevant criteria once you get into outer space. Obviously, for us here on Earth, that is a really important criterion. But we are what we're talking about with the Golden Record, if it actually ends up being found by someone who can hear it, it would be that, we have to completely renegotiate all our criteria. Like, what is music? What are the dimensions in which music exists? What kinds of things do we listen to and listen for?
Because human music is very specific to humans. So, even when we listen to whale song, are we really listening to what whales hear, right? So the question about aliens is we have no idea how they will actually filter the music. Listening to Bach for them, maybe just listening to, I don't know, a fart or something, you wouldn't know, right? And so I think NASA were hoping that the mathematics of music or the science there would do the trick, the complexity of that, but we cannot even guarantee that with alien ears.
I mean, it may be a universal language in some sense, right? Besides mathematics, maybe music. Now, a turtle theoretically senses time in a totally different way than a human being would sense it. So theoretically, can we learn from the way different life form, a songbird can, sing almost at the speed that we listen to it. So can we learn cues from things on Earth about the way life might interact with this music?
Yeah, we have a whole chapter on all these different animals. What would their experience be like listening to the Golden Record? And we were thinking, a fruit fly, for example, because of its metabolic rate, would actually experience time completely differently. So it would seem much longer for the fruit fly even to hear a very short piece, because it'll last most of the fruit fly's life, for example. Right. So yeah, I think all these things, right, our biological makeup, all the filters that we have built in, as well as the atmosphere and pressure and so on, will change the actual experience of music. I think Alex did a great job trying to theorize what it would be like for an octopus to hear music, and it has a much more limited range, and it's listening through
four hearts and
exactly right. What would that be like? That's pretty alien already, but actually we don't know. I mean, that's the issue. Even on Earth, we don't really know how to get inside another species experience of listening to our music.
Now, Alan Lomax, he would spend time going through the South, Leadbelly slept on his bed. He had an idea. It was more of a, what would you call him? One of the first musicologists going up into people's attics, finding this old music up in the attic. What was his sort of framework of thinking about this in the 70s,
Yeah, so he was incredibly influential, right? I mean, he collected music that was not, it existed. People hadn't really looked at it from a scholarly perspective, and he was really important in preserving a lot of these traditions and also kind of changing the perspective of what counted as music, and that it wasn't just Bach and Beethoven, but that folk music was a really valuable object of study as well. And so I think his, on the one hand, obviously he was really important in collecting certain repertoires and putting together various collections, but also on a broader level, I think his influence was really important in telling people what music is and what it could do. I mean, obviously he wasn't the only one, but he was certainly one who was very important in American culture. And he also helped the team that put together the Golden Record and putting them in touch with various collections. And it was really hard to get collections of non-Western music at the time. There were some archives. I mean, the biggest one, the most important one at the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., and they certainly made use of that. But, a lot of it was just about personal connections that, they went to New York a lot and talked to people, who had certain recordings of, specific ragas that they wanted to include. But it was very much word of mouth. And they took what they could get, but also what they really liked. I mean, they had very stringent aesthetic criteria about what they liked.
That's my question, because it's really, again, it's somebody's personal curation of taste. That, right? So, and so how, first of all, can we just explain a little bit about what you two do, because it's so interesting, and you're, a little bit just about your background, because I think it'd be important for the folks watching and listening. Daniel?
Well, we're both musicologists with an interest in music theory in particular. So I'm based in Hong Kong, but my work actually is primarily on the sort of the Western repertory, particularly on Beethoven. And so I do a lot of philosophical as well as theoretical work on music. That's what I do.
Alex?
I teach at Harvard. I also am a musicologist slash music theorist. And the slash is really, is a function of my education. Both Daniel and I were trained in England, in Cambridge, and there is no distinction between musicology and music theory. There, it's a small field, and so it's taught as one thing. Whereas in the American system, there is quite a strong division between historical musicology and music theory that sort of looks at music more systematically and tries to understand how it works. And so both our interests are really on the how does music work side. My work has also started in the 19th century with European concert music, which is, sort of one of the very central repertoires in musicology. But I have a short attention span and I've been jumping around quite a lot. I like to say that that I look at miscellaneous. I've worked on ancient Greek music. I've worked on the Eurovision Song Contest. And so moving into outer space was really a natural step.
Okay, thank you. Sorry.
Is that like studying Jenny Lind, like that kind of music, early concert music? Is Jenny Lind early concert music?
So she's definitely a big figure. There isn't a whole lot of research on historical performers just because we've lost, so their voices. But it's so that kind of repertoire is very composer based, and so you kind of it's
so,
yeah.
We hit this time where we have, Beethoven, Bach, Mozart, right? And there's a real complexity to the music. There's these motifs that go on in the music, and we have some really great people that come after that, but I'm not sure they ever reach that same pinnacle in terms of the construction of the music. How do you guys see that as an idea? Like why is it the art form so different now than it was then?
What a big question. Yeah. Well, the things change, right? And actually that what we might call the pinnacle and so on may not be a pinnacle in a way. I think these are
you're going to say Beethoven's
markers,
not,
right?
Yeah, Beethoven's not a pinnacle.
Well,
I don't want to tell you. I don't want to tell anybody that.
But if you throw the whole thing into space, right, it just makes things completely different. And you need to ask a completely different set of questions. What really is music? How does it work? Can you base your understanding of music on these sort of the pinnacles, right, on sort of Beethoven and Bach? Because if you do that, it'll be very particular and very, very specific, but it actually wouldn't speak in space. So we have to find a more universal grounding, if you like, for that. And so part of the book is to try to create this intergalactic music theory of everything. Now, how would you think, what kind of theory would you need to talk about all music and not just Beethoven and Bach and Chopin or something like that? So that's really the big challenge here. And so we have to actually get rid of those very important cultural questions, what makes music great, and just ask the simpler question, what is music?
So you have to subtract Cambridge entirely, and then just focus on Beyonce and how it makes you feel.
Not even that.
How it would make an alien feel.
Yeah.
I mean, it's funny from Beyonce because it's like we don't. And Jesse, this is the second time this happened to you recently. I think your Greeks got in trouble last week as well.
Oh yeah, last week we did a podcast and the guy said, I said, what about Aristotle and Socrates? He said, oh, they don't matter anymore.
They don't matter anymore. And he's a very brilliant
They were also the pinnacle.
Yeah, they were.
He was saying or like before, it was sort of anyway. But Daniel, you just said something incredible around, what is music? By the way, if we're doing it in space, and I know nothing about anything, but doesn't it just go out in the way that you hear things and how sound waves travel? Like it's all different. We don't even know what it could be, right? I see Alex's
Exactly.
body,
I think
right?
if you reduce it down, if you try to think of a way of a baseline, because what is NASA doing? Why are they even doing this? What on earth are they thinking about when they send music into space, right? So I think it's really about sending an experience of time into space. What music gives you is a coherent experience of time. So you are actually able to share something of your time with someone else, to keep in time with another species. That's what you're trying to do here, I think. And so you have to begin thinking about music and time and the way it makes time
So is it
coherent.
in the length of a piece or the relationship between the notes?
I think the relationship between timings, if you think of it in terms of repetition,
Right.
then you can begin to talk about music, both human and non-human, right? Then you can talk about it in other species, as well as just, I mean, most cultures actually think of music in non-human ways. So for Chinese culture or Indian culture, when you go back very early, even Greek, even Pythagoras, right?
Yeah.
They're thinking of the universe, and that the universe is making music. So even the sound of the waves, for example, on the NASA golden record would in some sense be rhythm, and can be perceived as music. And so I think if we begin from there, we're beginning to share the experience of time on Earth when somebody hears, say, the sound of the waves or the winds or whatever.
But when you think of like some of the classics that went up there, and then you think about if they are emblematic of some of the time, but it's also we listen and we have these emotional responses. It's an emotional, right, thing about how music makes you feel. If we get away from traditional, are we still ultimately looking for a feeling about what it is to be human? And that's what we want to communicate. This is some way in which we experience our lives through this auditory experience. Alex, I see you nodding.
Yeah, no, it's so great because you're raising all the points that we're trying to discuss in the book. And I think Daniel put it really beautifully, that it is about a feeling of being in time with another being, and we don't know what the emotional reach is of the golden record, or even what other extraterrestrial civilizations, if they exist, would be like. So we can only speculate about that, but we can be pretty sure about time in that it's such a general category that really brings all of human music together. That's the one thing that applies to all human kinds of music, irrespective of style and age and genre.
In a way, it's almost like if the first time I heard King Sunny a Day, right? Like I don't really know, I don't know what he grew up in or where the place is. So I really have no context for it. I can only analyze it from my perspective of a person who's just feeling like, oh, this is cool. But I wonder how an alien, I guess an alien really wouldn't make that much difference between that music. They would subtract all of the context completely. Now, has it made it so that when you guys listen to things you haven't heard before, you're listening with fresh ears, you're listening in new ways because of this analysis you've been doing?
I certainly have. I mean, I now listen much more in terms of repetition and rhythm and the shaping of time, right? And it's helped me to also appreciate even saying things like John Cage. They actually had a joke that they would send 4 minutes and 33 seconds into space as well, at the NASA team at the time. But actually, what he's trying to say here is that, listen to what's happening in time, right? It is actually coherent in some sense. And so when you take away the context, there is still a kind of internal mechanism that is happening in music that could be emotive, that could be rational. It expresses itself in various ways, right? But it's that internal element there that is being sent into space. And the question is, how do you get that internal element to express itself? What medium is it going to go through in order for it to connect with another species?
Now, when this was made and sent into space, it ignited the imagination of people. It had so much, it was sent in the 70s, it ignited your two imagination. So in some sense, Carl Sagan, who was a brilliant guy, he's challenging us on Earth to listen to this music. And what do you think he's he was trying to tell us about the way this was organized and what we should, the pale blue dot and all of that? Like, what was he trying to say to us about the family, the human family of music?
Yeah. So the backstory to this is that the Golden Record was part of the Voyager mission in the 70s, and the previous big NASA mission was the Pioneer mission, and they had the iconic plaque with the naked man raising his hand and the naked woman standing next to him, and the kind of symbols, and that got a lot of flack from the religious right. Because of the nudity. And so they were really skittish about using visual representations of humans. And so they thought, well, maybe we should try something, auditory, which seemed less controversial. So that was the immediate cause why they did that. But I think it was a really brilliant idea, because also with the Golden Record, with all the music, people can really connect to it. And, I would say the Voyager mission is the one NASA mission, maybe, other than the moon landing, that's stuck in people's minds. And when you mention the Voyager mission, the very first thing people always say is the Golden Record, even though from a scientific perspective, that was an afterthought, right? And it's not even particularly scientific. It was mostly about, getting high quality photos of the outer planets. That was the scientific mission. But that little record that they stuck to the outside of the spacecraft is the thing that people really connected with. And so that's one of the things that Carl Sagan was so brilliant at.
Cassini, they sent up, and it sent back amazing, incredible pictures of Saturn. But it circled Cassini endlessly, and then eventually, well, not endlessly, because then it eventually crashed into the planet. And it seems like there's a NASA at the moment, and just we have as a culture now, world culture, we're sort of really fixated on Mars, going to live on Mars. But Voyager was, and these early 70s space missions were much more, they went further. Voyager's out at the ends of it's further from us than anything that we've ever done in human time. Do you think there's something about the imagination of the time that pushed things out there like that?
Yeah, I mean, it was, it's so counter to the spirit of the age, right? I mean, this is the Cold War. This is, this is not a happy time. Vietnam had just happened. The oil crisis was on people's minds. And so, in that climate, they really set a sign of hope, right? And someone else is out there, things, and, they assume that if there is anything out there, it will be a friendly extraterrestrial civilization, right? Not a hostile one. You can also see that spirit of collaboration in the way they put together the Golden Record. I mean, Sagan was really concerned that this would not come across as an American project, but he really wanted it to be, worldwide. So, he was specifically thinking about the Soviet Union, how they could be represented. And, he called up his friends in Moscow and said, can you talk to the officials to ask what they want included in the Golden Record? Of course, when they got an answer from Moscow, they didn't really like what they suggested, and so they chose something else. But still, it was on their mind.
What was the Russian music they put on there? There was a lot of good choices.
Yeah, so what's interesting is that there is no actual Russian music included.
Oh.
The very first thing that they wanted was Karabieniki, this Russian folk song that had an afterlife as the Tetris theme song. And they were looking at one specific performance by a tenor called Nikolai Gedda, but he was born in Sweden, and so they thought he was insufficiently Russian, and so they didn't take him. And then the thing that the Kremlin really wanted included was this. It was sort of an artificial folk song that came from a movie from the 1940s, but it was called Voyager, and they thought, this is too political. We don't want to include that. And so in the end, they they looked to the other Soviet republics, and they included Georgian choral music and Azerbaijani magam. So, you know, parts of the Soviet Union were represented, just not Russia.
I mean, it's funny that you see nationalism, you see fundamentalism, you know, you see all these things reflected in the song selections, that you would think that if we're going to make a world choice, we would just make the best choices, most creative choices that we could. Although the Tetris theme song may not be any different than Mozart to an alien. You know what I mean?
Right.
But I think I'd like to just go a little deeper what you said, because I think there's something about, it's very, you know, frail to think that humans want to, in that time. So thinking of the context, and I'm thinking, of course, what will be the golden record post-pandemic? What would we send up now? And what, you know, if you think about it, you were just giving us the historical context, and this need to kind of, you know, we're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves. Also, it's a very vulnerable thing to do that. It you know, in a way, it's beautiful, and it's just we're here, you know, if anyone's out there, and also, it's interesting because we really have no way of we don't know, but we so want to connect with something else. So what is that? What do you think that is? Like, we so want something else. Is it to take care of us? Like, what do you think is the deeper meaning of that?
Well, I always think that, you know, this whole project is still part of the summer of love, you know, coming out there, these people, and actually one of the team members calls this Voyager project, you know, a love letter, right, to the universe. And so there is an element in which NASA really is coming in peace, right? They're sending music because they believe that music is a sign of peace. So it is a kind of sort of cultural diplomatic mission writ large here. And I think it begs this question, you know, what does it mean to send music into space? Do you presume then that space, our universe, is peaceful? Because the alternative is that it is a very violent universe. And in fact, a part of the reason why people complained about the Pioneer mission, and also this mission, is that you're giving away the coordinates of Earth. And that means that aliens will come and invade us, and we've done the most stupid thing you could imagine, right? But actually what Sagan is doing is the complete opposite, that fundamentally, even though he doesn't know, he believes, I think, that the universe is peaceful, or at least it's possible to send a love letter out there and hope that that would send a message. And I don't think the humans will get an answer back, of course. But if I was an alien and I somehow intercepted Voyager and somehow managed to decode this record by making a gramophone, I would know that there is peace somewhere else in the universe. I think that's the idea. So in a way, we are the answer to that question about whether we think the universe, in some sense, is meaningful.
So we're the ones we've been looking for.
It's kind of odd, right, that we would do this. Then why would we even do this, right?
Yeah. Well, you know, it could travel so far, it went to an alternate universe, you know. But if you were selecting today, would you make different choices? And would you make, you know, what criteria would you use to sort of, you know, is it fast music, slow music? Is it, you know, how would you think about it now?
It's super hard, and I'm so glad that someone else did it. Because, you know, I mean, just excluding music is so hard, right? I mean, it's, you know, there's always more music that you want to include. And I think, you know, I keep on thinking, yeah, it's not perfect. There's always more that you could include. And there are some, you know, geographic gaps, but it's pretty good. And I'm not sure I could do a better job. You know, I mean, I think, you know, there's no music from the Middle East. There is no Caribbean music. Those are probably areas that I'd like to see represented. There's no hip hop. I think that's sort of, you know, the major genre that, you know, it's too early. This is 1987, but that's probably something that, you know, in the golden record version 2.0 that I wanted to add.
Yeah, we should have had Grandmaster Flash on there.
Right.
Why are we thinking, can't we do another one? Or,
well, we don't have any probes going anywhere.
Oh, well, no, we might. I mean, the thing is, do you, and I know nothing about any, but like, are there sort of, can you go on Spotify and say, I'm going to make my own golden record? Are people doing that? I'm sure.
It's called a playlist.
Oh, that's what I mean. But is there, are you ever working with any AI technology to put it all together? So all of your theories and all of these great ideas, and then have you done that and put it into, not Watson, but put it into something and see what would come out if you put your criteria in?
We haven't done that yet. That's a really good idea. But so that's something for the future. I taught a class last semester where we put together a Golden Record 2020. I mean, it was much shorter. We actually found a company in North Carolina that produces single pressings of vinyl records, and so we had one record made. It's very eclectic. I mean, curating by committee is really hard.
Yeah.
And, what was interesting was that the collection ended up being really international. I don't think there is any song that is from the US. Our top ranked song was Aloha Oe, but that was written before Hawaii became part of the US.
Right.
So it's probably not the collection that I would have chosen personally, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
You have to think of it really as a time capsule. So you're trying to capture, they're trying to capture 1977. And I'm sure, I don't know whether you remember mixed tapes, right? But actually, you would compile your favorite pieces of music on this tape. It was a work of love, and then you would share it with someone else, right? And I think that's the concept. Yeah. And so I think if we were to do this again, we would have to think of it in those terms. This is a time capsule of the things that we love, and we would want to share it. Because there's no other way of doing this, because there's too much music. And actually, the other bizarre thing is that our technology is so advanced now that we could, of course, and then we have actually sent things digitally into space, but it actually makes less sense than sending a physical, a very limited and a very very simple object, actually. And that's the magical thing about the Golden Record. It's actually just a very simple mechanical thing that we sent into space. But that is the thing that would probably last longer than any sort of digital signals that we send out of music.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys very much. This is fantastic. Really appreciate you spending time with us to talk about this.
It's a pleasure.
For anybody watching, and so if they want to know more, where should they go to learn about what you're doing or anything you want to tell us or tell the audience? Questions for them? Should we ask them to think about?
You guys have a website, or the book is coming out, or anything? That?
The book is coming out sometime this summer. It's called Alien Listening. So look out for the book. It tells you everything.
Right.
Okay, we'll put it in the listing too.
I think we also want to ask everyone who's watching, what would you put on? What
music would you put on there? It's kind of interesting. Well, thank you, gentlemen, very much. Really appreciate your time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
See you later. Be well.